Okay, we're in Adobe Illustrator 2020 here, and I'm going to show you how to do a few techniques very quickly with the pen tool. I will explain some of the commands as I start to work. So what are we looking at here? Oftentimes I will like to go, let's turn on the layers here and show you the full opacity. Oftentimes I'll like to go out on the weekend, that kind of thing, and go to some flea markets and take pictures of some old signs. I don't always go ahead and purchase these things. Some of them are just pretty interesting, so I like to kind of challenge myself when I have time to recreate some of these signs in Adobe Illustrator. So I have brought in an image here onto an artboard and turned it into a template. So this is a template. It is locked down. It says the toggles lock here. We can untoggle that if we want to. And then we have access to that image. So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to draw over top of this, and this will become a template here. So let me show you that. If you double click off to the right of the image layer, you'll see it's designated as a template. It's very important that you check that. And then I normally dim my images back to about 25%. It really just depends on how much contrast is in the image. Is it a dark image? Is it a light image? That kind of thing. So if you're not familiar with bringing images into Illustrator, you go up to File and you go down here in File to Place. Now right now it's grayed out. It's grayed out because we have the image locked. The image layer, I should say. This template layer is locked. If we were to create a new layer above by just checking this Create New Layer button down here at the bottom, kind of page icon, you go up to File and then you go to Place, and you can see it's no longer grayed out. So it's now available. Okay, so I've created this new layer above. Let me kind of walk you through that. I'm going to rename that by clicking on it, and I usually call it line work. So I just key that in. I can also get to that, by the way, off to the right if you're not clicking on the name. It'll bring up the layer options menu when you double click off to the right. And this is where I generally will switch my color. Why do I switch from light red? I want to have enough contrast as I'm working on things to see kind of the guidelines that I'm working on here. And it'll make sense in a second. So I'm going to hit OK. And then I'm going to show you how we set up the stroke. So we'll do that now. Okay, now that we have the template layer set up, I'm going to go ahead and show you the stroke. We're going to set that up. And what I do is I go down here to my tools panel. It's on the left-hand side of the screen. Now I have a lot more tools here than Illustrator provides as a standard, as their default. So I have added some plugins that give me other tools here. So if it looks a little different, it is because of that. So you can see we have the fill and the stroke. And right now this kind of red line that goes through this line, that means that we don't currently have a color applied to that. So it is essentially transparent. So let's double click on where it says stroke. If you happen to see the fill in front, so sometimes it'll look like that, just click on the area that designates the stroke. So we have the stroke and the fill. Let's double click on that. I'm going to go ahead and set magenta as the color. It's just easy to see. It's nice and bright on the screen, and it's different from any other color that I normally use. So I've set that to magenta. Now I'm going to go up to Window and go down to Stroke. So you can see we're going to essentially set everything that we want, all the parameters for the line. So we can see the weight here as 1 point. I'm going to leave it at 1 point just for this exercise so you can see very easily on your screen what it looks like. Sometimes if you do a lighter weight, you can't really see it. So we'll leave it at 1. The cap, I'm going to set that as a round cap. And the corner, I'm going to set as a round join. So anytime there's a corner, it will be rounded rather than straight as in a miter join. This will all make sense in a second. I'm going to show that to you now. So we have our color set. We have some parameters set for our stroke, and we will close out of that. I'll grab my pen tool over from the left-hand side, and I'm going to zoom in. So I'm zooming in. I'm holding down Command and my space bar, and that allows me to zoom in on the Mac. It's Control space bar on the PC. Okay, so now that we have that set, let's just go ahead and draw a line. So this is what a line would look like. And if we look at the ends of this line, we can see it's rounded. So that right there was when we look in the stroke panel, you see the rounded cap. So if we made it square, you see that. And if we made it a projecting cap, we do that. So a butt cap, a round cap, and a projecting cap. Again, we'll just keep it as a curved cap. So it's rounded. Okay, let me show you the corner. So if we were to draw, just let's say we draw this kind of two segments of a line here, making kind of a pointer. You can see this area right here is a rounded corner. So that refers to the round join. So we click on that and we switch it to a miter join. It has a pointy shape that projects out a little bit. This one would be a bevel join. So a bevel join just kind of gives you a little bit of a bevel. The round join is great for drawing. I use it probably 95% of the time, just because it makes the artwork look a little more organic, handcrafted. So if you have things at very sharp corners, it tends to make it look a little more mechanical. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead with, now that we've had that set up, I'm going to show you how to set up a graphic style. So here over in our panels is the graphic styles panel. If you don't see that again, any of these are available under window. So we come down and we can see it's checked because it is in view. So this may look a little different for you, but if you hover over, it'll give you a tooltip. If we option click on that, it would add it to existing style, but control click. So I'm going to control click. I'm on the Mac, so it might be a little bit different on the PC, but it gives you a larger preview. Okay, so we see a larger preview of that line. Yours may look a little different, maybe a black line. But I'm going to show you how to create a graphic style. So we can click on anything over here on our artboard that we're working on, and we can drag it into the graphic styles panel, and we can see it's going to add it, and it puts it right in there. So how is this helpful? Well, let's say we had a line that was black, and let's say that line was 0.25, and this is what it looked like when we drew it. But we wanted it to be consistent with this magenta line, the thickness, the way it's treated, even down to the round join and the round caps. So we do have the rounded joins and everything here. That's good, and the rounded cap. Let's select this. And if we have it selected and we go over to graphic styles and we click on the graphic style that we had created, so we just added this one, it will set the exact same style as the other ones. So we can give these the same style. This line does not have a style, but if we click it, you can see this slight rule that goes around it. That means it is using this particular graphic style. It's applied to this line. Okay? Great. We can also override that. Let me show you that. So say we wanted to make our line thinner. We wanted to make it 0.5. If we click on this new 0.5 rule and we bring it over into this panel, but we hold down Option or Alt, so Alt on the PC, Option on the Mac, and we hold down Option and we hover over top, you can see we get this thick black line in there and the plus sign, and we let go. Now it's applied that style to everything that the style was originally applied to. So we had that first style applied to all of these lines. And now, since we've overridden it, it has now given it new parameters. So let's take that back by doing the same thing, 1 point. We'll go ahead and set that to 1 point. Drag it over. Oop, yeah, it's kind of hard sometimes to grab this. Okay, so we're going to select it, make sure it's selected, grab it. You'll see this ghost preview kind of. And then when we get into that panel, we hold down the Option or Alt key right over top, and now we're back to normal. Okay, so that's how we set up everything to work. We're just setting up our workspace. We're setting up everything so that we can use our pen tool here in the next lesson. So let's do that right now. Okay, so we've set up our graphic styles. I went ahead and deleted the lines that were used to create those graphic styles. They're no longer needed. So we're going to start working with the pen tool. The pen tool is available in the tools panel here. Coming down, and you can see it here. It's got this little nib here. You can also hit S on your keyboard. So now that we have that established, let's go ahead. We got our graphic styles ready to go. Got this one here that we're going to use. And we're going to go ahead and set up our artwork. We've created this line work layer, so let's make sure we're first on that. We've given it this green color by double clicking and then setting that dark green here in the layer options. So now we're ready to work with the pen tool. Got that selected. Let me zoom in on this S here. So we got this letter S here, this uppercase S that we're going to create. So here's just a little guide to think about. If you were to think of this S, the outer parts of the shape, as being almost like a racetrack, where is the outermost part of a curve and where's the innermost part of a curve? Well, once we've determined that, we can go ahead and set our points in those locations, and then we can kind of bend them into shape. So let me show you how that's done. So again, thinking about maybe it's like a bird's eye view. We're looking down on this letter S, and we're really just following the perimeter of the S. So the shape is going to be defined by the perimeter. So let's go ahead. I like to work in one direction here. I'm going to work clockwise as we go around this letter S. So let's put a point here. And my first point, what I do is I put it down, and then I hold down my shift key and I drag. So my mouse is held down. I use a mouse. You can use a trackpad, whatever you're comfortable with. So I hold down my shift key and I drag just a little bit off to the left. I drag to the left because I'm working clockwise. I'm going to be drawing in this direction. So that's the bottommost part, kind of the outermost part of this whole curve. Here would be the next outermost part, so where it's starting to change direction again, considerably. I know you could say it's changing direction all the time, but you'll see what I'm getting at here. Let me zoom in a little bit more. You can see up here, it's going to make a little bit of a change. We're going to put it right here. The next part, we're going to be coming down here. Here's the innermost part down here. Okay, it'll make a little bit more sense in a second. I'll also explain it another way. Here's another part here. Okay, so I'm talking about it as being almost like a racetrack. A lot of people just like to think of it this way. Okay, where, if you were to draw a box around everything, where would be the left edge of the box, the right edge of the box, the bottom and the top? Where would those areas be? So let me delete this for a second. Let's drag out some guides. I got my rulers active, Command R or Control R on the PC, and I'm going to drag out from this ruler. You can barely see it, by the way, but I'm going to drag out a line so that it touches the leftmost edge of this S. Okay, let me turn on my guides, Command and the colon key. Again, Control. Anytime I say Command, it's Control key on PC. Anytime I say Option, it's the Alt key on the PC. Okay, so just keep that in mind. All right, so I got my left edge established. Let's do the top. Let's do these real quick. We got the top one, and that's going to hit there, and then this one is probably going to hit right here. I like to put it right up where that curve would be, and then we'll put it down here. So we've kind of drawn the outer part of the S. If we were to continue drawing kind of these left edge, right edge parts of this letter form, we could keep doing that. So now we have this part of the S, and we have this part, you can see right in here. And I'm doing all the verticals, by the way, first. It doesn't really matter, but just setting them up. Okay. So I got that. Let's see, we got all the verticals, this edge, the inner edge. Here we go. Got a few more. One here. We could put one right here. See how it's just touching? So one there. Now, I think that's for the most part, I think we got everything. Okay, let's do the horizontals. So you're gonna have a bunch of grid lines. What you wanna do is, it's okay to do this in the beginning. What you wanna do is over time, just kind of get used to how this would look without the grid lines, kind of make those in your head. And then you don't need to draw all these. You can kind of predict where all the points will go. So this one would come down to here. You see how it can get a little confusing. I think I got them all there now. Okay, so you can see just a mess of grid lines, but it's kind of showing us where our points are going to go as we draw this kind of orange S that you see. We're going to probably put one here. I'll just show you real quick. We would put one here, see where it's crossing over. It's just hitting that edge. We'd put one here. And we may not need all these points. You'll see as we work. Put one there. Put one there. This one actually kind of comes right to a, yeah, there we go. That's kind of cool. Let's see. This one's going to be kind of in the middle. So we're just trying to figure out where it would go. Here, this one's going to be up right about here. So if you're following along, you can kind of see we're just drawing the points. Ah, we got another horizontal one there. Okay, so I'm going to select, or I'm going to click on that. It's going to hit right about here. So we're actually doing the work while we're going here. We've established everything. You can see this is one method. Some people will do it another way, and I'll show you that in a second. Basic techniques. I just want to show you how simple it can actually be. This one's going to look a little crazy for a second, but we're going to close it up there. Okay. So let's get rid of the grid lines and just see. So we're hitting the bottom edge here of the S, the left, the top part of this inner part. We may not need this one, by the way. We got this part because it's coming to the bottom of the hill. This is another one. So there's another way, another method that I learned from a really good illustrator, logo designer named Von Glitchka. So you can look him up on lynda.com or linkedinlearning.com. You can also look on YouTube, and you can also just search his name. So his first name is Von, V-O-N, last name is Glitchka, Glitschka. So a lot of these techniques were, he says, think of it like a clock. So if this was like a circle or a clock, an oblong clock, this would be the 6 o'clock, the 9 o'clock, the 12 o'clock, and it would be bent in here. So this would be like 3 o'clock. So kind of think of like these shapes as almost a clock. So this will kind of make sense as we go. So you can kind of see we've established all these points around here. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to kind of bend everything into position. So let's turn off our layer for a second. That's what it looks like without us doing any curves yet. Okay, so let's go ahead and do curves. So rather than select all these tools that you see around here, we could select direct selection. We could select the anchor point tool. There's a shortcut. There's a few shortcuts that you can use here using the pen tool. So if we have the pen tool selected, you can go ahead and select that. And then to go ahead and kind of craft curves, on the Mac, it's Option. On the PC, it's Alt. When you hover over a point that's selected, we've already selected this point, then you can go ahead and hover over, hold down your Option or Alt key, and it will turn into what is called the anchor point tool. And I like to hold down Shift. I'll explain that in a second. So first start dragging, so that it's kind of doing this, and then Shift constrains it to the horizontal or the vertical or a 45-degree angle. So we want it to be horizontal here. Let's drag that out, and you can see that it's bending things in. We're only going to drag it a little bit, though. We're only going to drag it to like there. You'll see why. If I zoom in here and I do the same thing, so Option or Alt, I'm dragging in the direction that I was drawing originally. You can see that we're only dragging out a little bit because this anchor handle, this is an anchor point, this is an anchor handle, this kind of rounded lollipop looking thing. This anchor handle And this anchor handle can be fine-tuned. They can be adjusted in small increments. And you kind of find that keeping them kind of even sometimes will help. So this is about equal length to that one. It doesn't have to be precise, but it usually works out that way. So let's hold down Option. We can select this anchor handle and the Shift key. So we're on the vertical now. A lot of curves can be created just using the Shift key. So you're keeping it vertical or horizontal. Let's try this one over here. So this is horizontal that I'm moving. This one's going to look a little funny, I think. So Option and Shift, and then I'm going to bring this over, Command Shift, and I'm going to bring this back. So Command Shift, so Command gives us this tool up here. This is called the Direct Selection tool. It'll give us temporary access to that. So we're using shortcut keys as we use the pen tool. Option being one and Command being one. Command is great for selecting the point, by the way. Then we would use the Option or Alt key. Again, PC, Mac, that kind of thing. And we can kind of just quickly adjust things. So Option, Shift, that's pulling it in to match that curve. It's looking a little crazy right now. Let's come back down to this one. So Command, Option, temporary access. We'll just pull that out of the way so we can kind of see this curve. Okay, we're going to go back and fix a lot of this stuff. I'm just laying down everything real quick. Option, dragging in the direction that we were going. This one, Command, clicking, Option, Shift. And you can see, I'm going to work a little faster now. Option. Still got Option held down because I'm working on the handles here. Command. I just clicked on that. Now Option. And I'm just bending that in. This one up here, Option. Keep dragging in the direction we were going. We'll work on that right curve. That looks pretty good. This left curve is got to come back. So Option held down and Shift again. Again, this is strictly vertical, strictly horizontal up here. Okay, let me do this a little faster. Let's bend this out. I call it just bending it out, but it's really just pulling out the curve and working. It wants to snap sometimes into position. So we're just going to kind of work on the curves slowly. This is a pretty thick line. It's kind of hard to see. So if you hit Command Y or Control Y, so Command Y, Mac, you'll get a preview. I call this just looking at the construction lines. So you don't have any color applied at all. It's just showing you the basic, very basic wireframe lines. I actually like to work this way sometimes, so let's work this way just for a minute or two. And you can see how I can fine-tune things now. I can see the exact curves. And it gives me a whole lot more precision, preciseness here. Yeah, I can kind of pull that in. This point I can move down. So if I click on that point, Command, and then click on it, I can use my arrow keys on my keyboard. And that's giving me a little bit better result, I think. It doesn't have to be exact because this is a drawing. It's pixelated, everything. You know, it's hard to see some of these things. So let's keep doing this one. Again, Option and Shift, keeping it horizontal. Let me let go for a second on my mouse, and then Option Shift will allow me to select just that handle. So if you kind of let go at times, you click, you hold down for certain things, you let go, you select something new. See, this is messed up there, so I can just hit Command and Z, get back. I can select just this handle. So try all of those keys, Option and Command. Try selecting things with them. You'll see that it'll become really easy. You'll get much faster. Now, general rule of thumb is to just do as few points as possible, and then using this method, kind of bend in the curves. You'll get a lot cleaner result. Anytime you add a point, generally speaking, it will add a new level of complexity, and you may even get a funny angle that you don't want. So I only have a few points making up this. See how we're working through? It's going pretty quick. So here's where I said we may not need this point. Let's delete it for a second. Okay, if we delete that, and then we hit Option and select the handle and pull it into position, you can see we really don't need it, probably for this curve. Now we got the upper part of the curve, and we're going to deal with that now. I'm going to click on this point, Command click. Again, it gives me direct selection access. And I'm just going to move it, just manually, over to the right. Now this is where we had set it up horizontal. I don't think it has to be horizontal. I think what we can do here is don't hold down Shift, but do select the Command key and then bend it into the shape that you want. We're going to make it a little more organic and not so hard of a corner there. It's not going to look exact. If we wanted more precision, we could add another point in there. You can see that it probably needs another point, but I'm going to try to get it as precise as possible. Okay, when we did that, it kind of recrafted this curve, so we're going to bring that back in. And we're going to just, you can see, it can work pretty quickly after we get this nailed down. Now let me let you in on a little tip here. This anchor handle for this top point and this anchor handle right here for this bottom point, they're crossing over the x-axis. So if we were to draw a horizontal line, they would be crossing over. Anytime that happens, it's probably a good idea to add a point that's in between so that your handles don't become so long. Sometimes if they cross over, it can be a little bit more challenging, and it can make for a little bit cleaner result if you do it as I say. So basically what you would do is add a point there so that they would no longer cross the x-axis. So let me do that right here. I'm going to add a point just along the midway, the midline, midpoint here. Let's see. Click. And you can see now they're no longer crossing the x-axis. So if we were to draw a line, that would be where the x-axis is. Those handles do not cross anymore. So just keep that in mind. It usually means your handles, you need another handle that might need to be added, or another points rather. Okay, so continuing on, it looks pretty good. We have this corner here. What I want to do is show you another tool while we're looking at it. So if you select this, Command and select that point, you see this little donut shape here, and when I hover over that, it gives this curved line. That allows you to go in, use Illustrator to make the curve. So right now, if we look at it, it's kind of sharp. We want to bend it in and make it curve as it comes around this curve. So let's look at that just for a second. So you can see it's got a little bit of a bump in here, a curve. So we want to mimic that. So let's select that, Command, click on that point, and then hovering over top of this donut shape, hold down on it and pull it towards the center of the shape. So we can go really curved like that, or we could just do a subtle curve. That's what we want. We just want something about like that. Okay, now we're going to keep working here. This looks a little funky. You can see here that this anchor handle has crossed over the vertical axis for the other one. So what does that mean? If we were to draw another line coming out, another guide right there, you can see the top handle has crossed over that guide. That's the axis for the point below. It sounds a little confusing, but when you cross over the axis, that's generally what's causing your artwork to not look as well crafted. So let me undo that or get rid of that. I'm going to take this handle and just drag it back so it's on the other side. And then I'll pull this one up and we'll just start crafting this. Now again, I like to work Command Y. I like to work in this construction line mode. I think it's just called a preview mode. Let's see, I can move things around. I can even grab that point and say I want it to be more here, and I want to bring this back, and I want to just kind of redo things. I can do that. I like that a little better, actually. So sometimes you have to move the points because they weren't, we just roughly placed them down. We're just working. It's kind of like doing anything. You work very generally on the general things, and then you work into the details as you go. So it's like painting, for example. Okay, so we've gone ahead and we've drawn everything out. We're still in preview mode. That's what it looks like. Okay, so that was one method. We set all the points first, then we went back in and we adjusted things as needed. So we added the curves after the fact using the Option key and the Command key. So Command to select those points, select some of the handles when needed, Option to get the anchor point tool. We used Shift to constrain everything to a horizontal or vertical axis wherever possible. Sometimes we would actually work, and as in this region, we would change that a little bit. We'd put the anchor handles on another angle other than 90 degrees or 0 degrees. So, okay. So in the next lesson, I'm going to show you another method for creating the exact same shape, the S. And I like to work that way, so we'll go ahead and look at that next. Okay, so we just finished up the first method, which is where we placed all the points and then we bent things into shape. Now we're going to do what I like to call the as we go or as we draw method. You can really call it whatever you want, but it's kind of, you're doing all the work as you go. So let's go ahead and click on the one that we did before and delete that. We're working on the line work layer. We have our pen tools selected, and we're going to zoom in now on this S. So I always start at the bottom. I'm not really sure why. You can really start anywhere. But generally speaking, if you start on a straightaway or on the outermost part of a curve, it's a lot easier to deal with if you start in those points. So it really doesn't matter where you start, whatever you're comfortable with, but I like to start on the bottom. So here's what we're going to do. Rather than just clicking and making points as we did before, kind of like this, we're going to do another method. I'm going to click and I'm going to hold down on my mouse and I'm going to hold down the Shift key. I'll be doing Shift key a lot in this one, and I'm just going to drag out just enough. Okay, so let's see here. The next part I'm going to do is, this is a point. I'm going to go ahead and put it right here. So we're kind of still establishing our points, but we're dragging as we go this time. So Shift, because I want to keep it vertical. We're just going to put things down. Shift, drag. So click, Shift, drag. We're just putting it down just enough. So click, then the Shift key, then drag. Click, Shift, drag. So we're constraining everything. Click, Shift, drag. So I went a little bit far, but that's okay. So it might look like this. If you're new to Illustrator, don't worry about it so much. Don't get frustrated, in other words. You can go back as long as you have the points established. You can do things after the fact. And that's the whole idea. So don't try to be a perfectionist with Illustrator right away. Just know that you can, if you set your points, which is probably the most important, if you set your points right, you can go ahead and achieve the results later. So this looks terrible, but we're kind of just dragging out what we can. So again, rather than setting the points and then dragging things out, we're setting the points, dragging as we go. All right, so let's do this. And when I click back to here, I'm going to drag in the opposite, or actually I'm still dragging the way I'm drawing, but I'm holding down the Shift key, Option and Shift, and that's going to give me that handle over there. I don't want to keep it too long because I'm going to bend things back now. So this is a terrible looking S, obviously, but now we can go in and fine tune things very easily. So Option, Shift, bring that back, Option, Shift, keeping the Shift key, again, keeps everything vertical or horizontal. So Command click to select the point, then the Option key and Shift. All right, you'll see where we're going to deviate from using the shift key. So I'm still doing this. Remember about these crossing. So they've crossed the x-axis. Let's just stick a point in there by hovering over. Still have the pen tool. Just click. Just leave it alone. And let's go back up to here. So command click on that. And I can use my option key and shift and continue drawing. You want to try to share the curve as much as possible with these handles. So it works out really well. So click on this one. And then I got that shift, and then I bring this back. So you can use the command key sometimes to do this as well. So this looks pretty good here. Kind of happy with that. All right, so let's click on that. And then we can still use our command key shift. We don't have to use our option key. So sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. But you'll get a lot faster as you go. So this is gonna look a little, you don't want to ever have it be like that because you will have a point there. So let's look at that. See how it looks? Doesn't look real well crafted. So let's command click on it, and let's bend that back into position. And that's why you're kind of doing this back and forth. Again, you're sharing the curve, but you're trying to have some really nice looking handles here as you go. And see, they're crossing over the x-axis now, so I'm just going to put a point right there. So now we've reestablished things. Didn't really have to. It just is easier to see it. Okay. Let's see down here. This looks like it needs a little bit of work. Pull that back in. This one, remember, we don't have to stay horizontal, so I'm going to go ahead and just select it. I'm going to bend that in. I'll select the point, move it down. So you're really going to only use 3 keys: Command, Option, Shift. That's it. Any combination to access these tools very quickly. The tools that we're accessing, by the way, you could do it the hard way. I don't think it would be a lot of fun, but you could do it the hard way. You could get to those tools. So pen tool we're using. You could get to the anchor point tool here, or you could just hold down Option using the pen tool. Okay. Or you could get to the direct selection tool here, or you could just hold down the command key as you're using the pen tool. And then we've already discussed the shift key. All right. Let's see here. Moving that over. So it looks pretty good. It could use a little bit more refining, but that's generally how you do it. This is probably the #1 question I get. You're really just working with shapes the whole time when you're creating things. Okay, and some of those shapes have what I like to say just simply holes through them. So the letter A, it has this counter shape here. It's called a counter of the A. And you want that to drop out of the main part of this shape, the A, the outer part. So think of it as an inner part and an outer part, 2 different shapes. But we want that inner shape to knock out of this outer shape. So let me show you how to do that real quick. I'm just going to walk through here. I'm going to use all the same principles. I'm going to just show you how we can get this to be roughly correct. I'm going to drag. I'm doing that method that we just talked about, where you just put a point down and then drag a little. And we'll refine it in a second. I'm not going to worry about all the details. I'm just getting things generally established. Let's put one here. I'm going to kind of bend that in. So then I'm going to go a little vertical. Then I'm going to go horizontal. And here I'm not going to go vertical. I'm just going to kind of drag it in the direction so that it aligns with the artwork. I'm going to put this here. Then I'm going to put this here, and I'm going to kind of bend it in the direction I'm going. So you'll find easy ways to do things. I just like that vertical horizontal method. But if you can achieve the same result, then go ahead and do it. You know, it really doesn't matter how you get there. It's really just, does it look right? So this right here, I'm not real happy with it, but I can keep working on this. I can keep bending it into shape, moving it. And I have to remember that this is kind of a brush writing, so it's a little more forgiving. So here's the donut. I can curve that in a little bit. Click on that. I get another donut. Donuts again, I just call them donuts, but the ability to curve corners, it only happens with corners. So just keep that in mind. If you're on a curve, I'm not going to get a donut shape here because this is a curve. But on a corner, where I've established a corner point, that's not going to be 1, 2. But on a corner, you will see that little donut shape. So if you're confused ever and say, I'm not getting that, I don't have it. Well, that's why. Okay. So let's take this down. And then I'm going to show you how to switch directions here. This is kind of fun too. So we're looking at this letter A. Obviously, it could be cleaned up a little bit more. Let's do the counter shape, the inner part. We have the outline, the outer shape done. Even though we're looking at lines, I still call them shapes. So let's start. I said sometimes you want to start not on the inner part of a curve, start on a straight line. Here we have an opportunity. So let's do this. Let's go like that. And let's click here. I'm just going to click, but I'm going to come up beyond that a little bit. And then I'm going to click here. And I'm going to click here, and I'm going to click here. Now I'm back to the beginning, but I really don't need this point here. So if I hover over it, I can delete it. So now we have a shape here inside, but it's got this kind of, it doesn't really have a handcrafted approach. Command Y, that's going to get me into this preview mode. And I'm going to click on the points. So I'm clicking on the first one, shift clicking on the second one. I get donuts because these are corner points. And then shift clicking on the last one. So I have my command key held down. And now I can do all of them at the same time. See how that is? So you can select multiple corner points and affect the curves very easily. I think I'm going to take it to about there. That looks good for these bottom ones, but we can see the drawing up here, not so good. So let's click off, and then we'll click on this point, and we'll drag that more into like a shape. It's a little bit different. Now you can see in here, we got a little bit of an issue. This is too straight in here. So let me show you another really cool tool. If you hover over with the pen tool, and then you hold down your Option key on a line segment, so not on a point, you can see the icon changes to this curve with little points on either side of the curve. So we get this little preview icon. If now, when you are hovering over, you have the Option key held down on the Mac, Alt key on the PC, and you hold down your mouse and drag, it will bend that line just a little bit. So it's going to add these handles to the points and do the in-between for you. So here's a little tip. You'll probably hate me for it, but you could do the same thing over here. So if this was straight, let's just say we drew it like that. If I hold down my Option key, I can do the same thing over here. Now we got a little bit of an issue. You'll see why in a second. See up here, we're going to have to recraft that. So let's just pull that back into position. Let's come up here. So you'll get used to how to draw things pretty well. You want this to be as straight as possible so that there's no bump in there. You may not be able to see it, but there is a slight bump in the artwork right here. You can kind of see it. So in order to straighten that out, we can redraw it if we want to, like that. And we can come down here. This one's even worse, but you can see it's actually crossed over. So we're going to bend this back in and hold down my Option key and pull this back into position like that. And then we have this corner, and we'll just kind of curve that in. So it went really fast, I understand. So what am I getting at? We drew the outer shape of the A, the inner counter of the A, and now here's the question I get the most. Let's do this. Let's select the outer shape and the inner shape. So I'm going to shift and click on the inner shape. If you can't get them both that way, you can simply take your selection tool and drag around the shapes. You can even drag around just part of them, and it'll select the shapes. So anytime you drag around, it's going to select whatever shapes are in that drag region that you just did. So both of these are selected. You can't really see it until you look, and you can see this preview line. That's why I made it green, by the way. So when I made this layer dark green, if we made it red, you wouldn't be able to see it real well because it would kind of clash with this magenta color. All right, so here is the question I get. What we're going to do first is we're going to take this from a line and we're going to make it into shape. So we come over here to the Tools panel on the left-hand side, and we're going to swap. This little arrow here will swap the fill and the stroke. So there we go. So it's taken the stroke color and it said, let's fill it with that color and get rid of the line. Okay, so we got that. We got these two shapes, and you can see our problem right away. The inner part of the A, the counter, is not showing up. It's not punched out. So there's two ways to get rid of that. The way that I feel is the best way to work. If you can master the Pathfinder panel, it will work really well for you. You can also do it another way I'll show you. But you come up to Window, go down to Pathfinder, and that's going to bring up this panel here, Pathfinder panel. And you have different shape modes. We're only going to focus on the shape modes right now. So we see Unite. If we select this shape, if we select both shapes, and we do Unite, it's going to take everything that we've selected and unite them following the outermost shape. So because that counter was contained within the outer part of the A, it basically just merged everything together. Let's undo that, Command Z. So we don't want to do that. We want to do this second one, minus front. Minus front. So it's going to work because I drew this shape second, right after I drew the outline. But if you're ever having trouble and it's not working right, check under Object and go to Arrange, Bring to Front. It's very important that this inner shape be in front of the outer shape because we're going to be using minus front. So let's select both of these shapes again, and let's simply click on minus front. So there we go, minus front. That's how we knock out or punch out the inner counter of the A. And now we can actually go back and we can swap them again, and we're left with that. So now you might be saying, okay, well, I got these shapes. How do I work with them? There is a mode in Illustrator called isolation mode. I love that. So what you do is as you have this whole thing selected, you double click on the part that you want to work on. So I double click on it. I have access to the inner shape. I can move it around. I could delete it. I could do whatever I want. So then if I click out by just clicking out anywhere else on the screen, this is still seen as one shape. So if we're not in isolation mode, it will see it as one shape still. You can also double click on it, get back in there and fix it back and put it in its correct position. Double click out and you have the A again. So that's one way to get rid of that inner shape. Another way is to select everything. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go to the Object menu, Compound Path, Release. Okay, so we didn't see anything change. It's just we're releasing one shape, the inner shape, from the other one. So now we can click on them separately, like we could before. So we're basically back to the start. And we can tell that by selecting everything, swapping the fill and stroke, and we can see we're back to the very beginning. So there we go. Here's another thing. I showed you how to punch things out, minus front. So suppose we have these two shapes here. Got them both selected. And we do want to drop out this inner part, but we don't want to use minus front. Here's another way to do it. If you come up to Object and you have those two shapes selected and you go down to Compound Path and you select Make or Command 8, or Control 8, we now have created one shape. So that's like a really quick way to do it. Probably the quickest way is just Command 8. So it'll knock that out immediately. So no need to do minus front for that. And then let me show you one last method. So there are multiple methods. The last one's a little more confusing. It seems like it would be a lot better, but I'm not real happy with some of the results because sometimes it will leave you with extra shapes and you don't want that. You want clean artwork all the way through. So let me show you. Object, compound path. Let's get back to where we were, release. We have two separate shapes. We're going to select those two shapes. And now I'm going to use a tool over here in the Tools panel. So we're going to come down to the Shape Builder tool. It's two little circles with dots in them and the Direct Selection tool. So let's select that. We have that selected, and when we go over to our artwork, as long as we had those two shapes selected, we can hover over, and you can see that when we hover over certain areas, it highlights. So it's highlighting the counter shape here. It's highlighting the outer shape. If we want to combine the two, we can simply draw through both. So I'm holding down my mouse and drawing through them, and it's now combined everything. That does the same thing as the Unite option in the Pathfinder tool. We don't want to do that, Command Z. Instead, we want this piece to knock out. It looks like it is now, but it's not. So let's hold down our Option key, and you can see that the plus sign becomes a minus sign. And then we're just going to click. And that has now knocked out that shape. We can tell because we can come back over here. Let's select our selection tool here, and let's swap. And now you can see. So I'm not really a fan of this method. The quicker, the better. I think Command 8 or Control 8 on the PC works great. We're going to create a compound path from the two shapes, and it works great for letter forms like this. So if you look at this cupcake, we got everything on a template layer here, the image, and we've dimmed it back to 25%, and we're going to hit OK, and I'm going to work on a line work layer. It's called line work, but what we're going to be doing here is a combination of different things. So we've used the pen tool before. You can come in here and say we wanted to create this kind of little sprinkle here on the cupcake. We could use our pen tool and we could work on it like this. And that could work just fine. But you can see how it would take some time to do, and you'd be setting down a lot of points. And, you know, maybe there's a better way that we could do it that looks a little more handcrafted even. Okay, because we got a lot of sprinkles to do here and we want to cut our time down. So let's get rid of that. So the pen tool really isn't the best tool to use in this case. What we can do is we can use some of the brush tools. So we have the Paintbrush tool and we have it selected, and we can see this circle, kind of a ghosted circle. That's our brush size. So if we hit our bracket keys on our keyboard up near the delete key, if we hit the bracket, this would be the left bracket. That's going to take our size down. And the right bracket takes the size up. Now, if you're working with say a tablet and a stylus, you might have pressure sensitivity that allows you to do certain things. And you might be more comfortable with that. You can change your brush size a different way. But what I generally like to do is I like to use those bracket keys and get, with my paintbrush tool here, I like to get into a rough ballpark for how these curves are. So you can see this curve, this curve, this curve. They kind of have the same radius as the tool, the brush size that I'm using. Okay. So over here in the brush size, or the brush, I should say paintbrush tool in the tools panel, if you double click on that, it's going to bring up a few options. We can get very accurate with our brush, or we can get very smooth with the brush. I generally keep things in the middle, but let me show you. So if we go to smooth, and let's uncheck. We'll keep selected. How about that? we'll have options, keep selected. I'll show you this in right now. So we have it set to smooth, keep selected. I'm going to go ahead and draw. So I'm just drawing. I'm using a mouse, by the way. But if you use a tablet, you can do the same thing and you draw out your shape. So what does that leave you with? It leaves you with a stroke. And the stroke appears to be filled, but because it's so small and we're using a 1-point stroke, we really have to turn that way down to see the result. Okay? So you can paint with strokes that way. Now the advantage is we can go in, we can look at this, and we can see that we can bend things into position. Kind of like what we did with the pen tool. It generates these little points with the curves or the handles ready to go, and you can kind of bend things in how you like it. Okay, we can even close the two. It's a good idea. So I'm going to select this point, and then I'm going to shift click on the other point and hit Command or Control J, and that's going to join. That's going to join everything together so that it's now a closed path using this stroke. Okay, so the whole thing is called a path. So now we can bend this into position. We could turn this to a smooth point up here in the Convert Selected Anchor Points. So up here, if you don't see this bar, just go to Window, Control, and it'll bring up a control bar here. It's a contextual menu that changes depending on the tools that you're using. So we could make that a corner, you can see, or a smooth point, smooth curve. Okay. So that's one way to do it. The good thing is, again, you get a path. So kind of like when you're drawing letter forms using the pen tool, you're left with a path, but you really don't have to worry about that too much. Let me show you why. So let's get out of that. Let's go to another tool here. We used the smoothness of the paintbrush there. You could get very accurate. These things, you could try these out on your own, but fill new brush strokes and edit selected paths. Keep selected. Just try out some of these features, see what you get. Let's go to the next tool down, Blob Brush. This is one of my favorite because you use it basically like a paintbrush that you're familiar with in other applications. So let's double click on it and we get some of the same options, smooth, accurate. I do want to show you what happens with these. Let's uncheck that. This is where you can set pressure sensitivity. You can do some things. You can change your brush here. You can make it more of a calligraphic brush if you want, or just leave it as a round brush. So there's little things you can do with the blob brush. Let's leave it on smooth, hit OK. We got keep selected, and now we're going to do the same thing. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger using my right bracket key, and I'm going to get it right about there, and I'm going to just start painting. So I'm using my mouse, I'm going around, and I'm painting the shape as best I can. The accuracy is a little bit different with the mouse, and I'm going to let go. So it smoothed everything out. It gave minimal points here, and now, just like I told you before, we can select these points and we can change them. We can bend them into new shapes. We could even make logos this way if you wanted to. Maybe you're drawing something you needed to get a drawing done fairly quickly. We can even take our pen tool and using all the same features. We can delete. We can stretch things out. I'm using my Option key there. We can create a corner and then bring it out that way. Again, the fewer the number of points, generally the better. So we have very few points here. We only have 5 points and a couple handles to make that shape, but it's very smooth and it's still very kind of geometric looking. It doesn't look very organic or hand-drawn. We want it to be more brushy, so let's delete that. Come back into the blob brush, let's double click on it, and let's take the accuracy all the way over so it's very accurate on the fidelity. Let's try it again. So I'm drawing around it. I'm going to get a little more bumpy this time, a little on purpose actually, because I kind of want you to see what it looks like. All right, let's draw that and let go. See how many points it's now added? It's added a lot of points. So I'm not a big fan. I like to do somewhere in the middle, because then I can delete things I don't need and I can refine things. I'm not a big fan because the more points, the bigger your file is. So you need more disk space, first of all. And second of all, it can be very complex. It can slow your application down. So Adobe Illustrator, we have to do this whole illustration. The more points you have, the more Adobe Illustrator has to work hard. So let's delete that. Come back in, double click. I'm going to set it right in the middle and hit OK. And now I'll draw it one more time. I'm going to draw a little bit faster this time. But it's just like using the paintbrush from any of your applications. So if you're more comfortable, you can do it that way, and then you can refine things as you go using the pen tool. Okay. So I got that. You can explore the smooth tool. So if you wanted to smooth out this corner here, we could drag with the smooth tool over it, and it'll kind of redraw those points. You see how it's doing that? So I can kind of I can bend things a little bit. Oftentimes it just removes the point to get a smoother curve. So that's the smooth tool over there. If you don't see it, it's underneath the shaper tool. So it may be stuck on the shaper tool. Blob brush. Let me show you one more thing and then we are finished here. Blob brush, double click. There's two options at the top. Keep selected. So as you're working, the last shape that you drew will stay selected. If you don't want that, we can do this. If you just want to draw like with paint and not have to worry about it staying selected, after we are done drawing this, you won't see the points. You'd have to select them. See that? We could draw this shape too if we wanted to. Let's just do that. And you notice I put my accuracy down to right about the middle there. So smooth, accurate, those kinds of things. Okay, so you can see we'd have to go in and now manually select these things. So let's delete those. And let me show you one last thing here. So we're going to do keep selected. I generally have it at keep selected all the time because I may want to work on it right away. Merge only with selection. So let's keep it off. And I'm going to show you something with the pen, or not the pen tool, but this blob brush. So if we go ahead and we create this shape, and let's say we create this shape again. All right, we're doing that. These are not touching, so they are separate shapes. But the minute I start to draw over top of a shape, it combines with the other shape. So if I do it over here, I have nothing selected, for example. It's all one shape now. So you can add just by doing that. See, I'm going to do this. As long as they're touching at any part, it becomes part of that shape. Okay, so that's if you have in the blob brush settings these unchecked or this unchecked. We could keep selected if we wanted to. Let's do merge only with selection. So here we go. We're going to draw out this shape. All right, got that. We have keep selected. I'm going to deselect it so I can show you. So it's selected right now. Actually, let's stay here. It's selected. This shape is selected. So now we can draw this shape. And because we had merge only with selected checked, now we're getting the two combined. Okay. So suppose we draw this shape first. This is getting fun. Drawing the shape over and over and over again. Okay, it's selected. Let's deselect it. So Command and click anywhere. And then I'm going to have this overlap. Let me just draw this roughly. It is now selected because we said keep selected. But because this shape below, or this shape here, was not selected already, it did not merge it. So now they're separate. So it's really up to you. If you want to select them, merge only with selection, keep selected, those kinds of things, just play around with that as well. Okay? So you have separate shapes. That's good because if you ever want to go back and colorize them differently, maybe you're doing leaves on a tree and you don't want them all to be merged, you want to have some variation in color, you can do that by doing this exact method. So watch this. Here's one more thing, and then we are finished. So this right here, I'm going to draw the outer shape. This is a perfect example, by the way. These little sprinkles, they're actually made up of two different colors. One is kind of a dark gray black. The inner part is a tan. So maybe we'll do that real quick. I'll show you how it's done. We're just drawing the outer part. There we go. I'm going to deselect that. I'm going to go into preview mode, Command Y, and I'm going to now draw the inner part. There we can see this is the inner part. Can't see it in the drawing right now, I know, below, but so we now have two shapes. They're separate from one another. This one is going to be the dark gray. So let's get out of preview mode. Let's go into swatches. I'm just going to very quickly make a dark gray. Drag all our sliders so they're roughly even. So when our numbers are even, we can achieve a gray. So let's just do 40, 40, and 40. That's a dark gray. Let's do, how about 70, 70, and 70. It's a little bit lighter. Okay. So there we have that. And then we want to do a tan color. We can eyedropper the color if we want to. So let's go into our image layer. Let's take this up to 100% so we can see the actual color. We're just going to eyedropper one of these colors. So let's select that. And let's go in to our color swatches. Actually, let's not do that. Let's grab our eyedropper from the Tools panel. The eyedropper is down towards the bottom here. If you click on eyedropper and you come over and you suck up one of the colors, I know it's kind of funny, but it will automatically, if it's selected, apply that color. So there we go. So let's turn it off. And that's how the vectors would be. Now we could go in and clean things up, delete points off this one. I can come in and say, I don't want that point. I want to stretch this out a little bit. I want it to be a little smoother. Maybe I want that to be even more smooth. So I just do that. And maybe I want to change this point to a curve a little bit more. Get rid of that. You can see how much flexibility there is once you have things down. So sometimes people like to paint in something and then they are very well skilled with vectors. They'll go ahead and make modifications. So we got a little stray point in here. We can delete if we want to. Yeah, I think this is made up of several different, there we go. So you can see, I just like playing around and I like to try to get it a little bit cleaner. There we go. So that's just one. We'd have many. But you can see how using the Blob Brush especially can really speed up vector creation and make things look more handcrafted. Make it look like it was done with the brush. Maybe painted on there. So a lot of these signs were painted. Okay. Let's set that back. So that's really it. I just wanted to show you how you can work with the Paintbrush and the Blob Brush to achieve things that are a little more organic, a little more hand-drawn looking.